boys! We have a production upgrade. I have a mic, I don't sound like ass anymore, and we have lights. Now the only thing I need to do is get off my ass and iron this green screen, which, never gonna happen. This is part 3 of Medieval America. The other 2 parts I really suggest you go watch, because if you don't, you're not gonna have any idea what the fuck is going on. That being said, neither do I. My name is Alexander, recent discoverer of the After the End mod for CK2, and if you like what you see here, you can go ahead and do me a favor and hit the buttons down below, you know the ones. Also, if you made it through all 3 videos and still aren't subscribed, what are you doing? Clearly you have enough time to waste on me, so I say go all in. I'm really hoping that this one is not 40 minutes to an hour long, because I only have like 4 or 5 factions to cover, and they're relatively small. So please God, be short. Now, the Great Plains in our real life are divided about along the 100th parallel between wet plains and dry plains. I think Real Life Lore did a video about that. The thing here is that because the wet plains are more towards the Mississippi River, obviously that encourages people who live in the Great Plains to move eastward in order to get their cattle better pastures with more abundant water. This matters because there's a guy in the wet plains who set up shop earlier than everyone else, and he is called the Ninkar. Now the Ninkar is, I took the word Nina, that means chief in the Blackfoot language, and then I made it more Mongol sounding so it would sound more villainous. And that's how we have the Ninkar and the Ninkarate. And the Ninkar's like big brain strategy, fucking mega mind idea is every time another tribe migrates from the west over to the east, that tribe either has to submit to the Ninkarate or get destroyed by their currently set up hegemony. So pretty much every tribe in the Great Plains that is moving eastward, which is a lot of them, has to submit to the Ninkarate. So you get a large amount of grassland filled with horse tribes that are all united under one leader. And then just across the Mississippi, you have a bunch of disparate, disconnected kingdoms that used to be part of an empire, but have now been shattered and are extremely weak and constantly fighting with each other. Take a guess where that leads.
Hey, old man, give me everything.
Call an ambulance, but not for me.
There are still plenty of tribes in the western or dry plains, and the Ninkarate technically still claims that side of the Great Plains, but they don't exercise any actual power over it, because it's kind of... why? All that's there to raid is a bunch of city-states that are basically on the brink of collapse anyway, and a couple goat-herding tribes. So it's not necessarily the prime real estate that is the east of the Mississippi. Tribes in the west also tend to herd more goats than cattle because it's just easier without the water. As is with all of time, the Ninkarate's horse archers and cavalry are the terror of the continent, and they just rip through peasant armies, farming villages, sedentary societies. They can't be stopped, except by fortresses.
Hey! Hey, that could have killed me! Hey, guys! We missed! Get another! Stop acting like this is a joke! Oh, is poor little baby going to cry? What? No. Do you need a pacifier, Iron Baby? No! No, I don't!
Which is like their one weakness. Because, surprise, horses aren't very good at besieging castles. So while the Ninkarate can't necessarily hold on to much of the land that they take, they conduct huge raids into the east for tons of profit. Would they like to settle there? Sure. They just haven't found the right people to build them siege engines yet. But that's not very far off. See, I told you this would be fast. Now we're going to do well, it's not even really a faction, it's just a region of the continent that only has like 4 paragraphs that I wrote. Not very long paragraphs either.
Wondering how to get away with murder but don't want to Google it? Go to Yellowstone Park. There's a 50 square mile area of the park in Idaho called the Zone of Death, where, due to a possible constitutional loophole, you could theoretically commit any major crime and avoid conviction. So all of Yellowstone is under the jurisdiction of the District Court of Wyoming, even though small parts of the park are in Idaho and Montana. So if you decided to murder someone in Idaho's 50 miles of the park, you could invoke the 6th Amendment right to convene a jury with people from the district, Wyoming, and from the state, Idaho. But only wildlife lives in that area of Idaho, so a constitutionally legitimate jury with people from the state couldn't be seated to try you. Now Congress could just place Idaho's portions of Yellowstone inside the District of Idaho, but they have repeatedly refused.
The Mojave Desert, the Great Basin, and the Rocky Mountains are all basically inhospitable to anyone except nomadic herder tribes, which don't have the large horse population that the Great Plains tribes do, so they aren't nearly as dangerous as the Great Plains tribes, though they still fuck around a little bit. But the Western herding tribes are very, are kind of a mixture of like cowboy culture and more like ancient Bronze Age type technology, because they don't necessarily have any specific advantages or anything that would make them stand out amongst the competition. However, they do serve a purpose within the meta context of my story. And it is that they are the ones who remember the whole Last Alliance versus Leviathan thing the best. They remember Leviathan because they have a very strong oral storytelling tradition. So any like exposition you want, they're the exposition people. That's what they are. You want to learn something about Leviathan? You go into the desert, you go into the mountains, you find a shaman, ask them. Odds are it'll be shrouded in vision quests and lots of drug use and thousands of years of the oral storytelling corrupting the true essence of the story. But that's probably your best bet regardless. Okay, now we get to the fun ones. Mormons.
One of the things that gets talked about from like ex-Mormons is this whole soaking thing.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a legit thing that people do?
Oh, yeah. Fucking involves
Someone's
in
taking
and
notes.
out. That is fucking. Okay, so this is a biological lesson.
Oh, I have heard of
this. Soaking is, well, what if I just go in and sit there?
Based out of Salt Lake, which they are in real life, the Church of Latter-day Saints has taken a much more prominent role since the fall of the Old Republic, and has established several city-states along the northern bank of the Colorado River and throughout Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming that serve as bases for them to spread their religion and stop the spread of Catholicism by the Catholic city-states that are based around the Rio Grande Basin. The most powerful of these city-states, one called Sihon, which is the Arabic way to say Zion, located just off the coast of Salt Lake. So the Mormons are basically a network of theocratic city-states that are at constant war with the Catholic theocratic city-states to their south. And I thought it'd be cool to incorporate most of the Muslim immigrants from modern-day America into the Mormon city-states. And slowly over time, the traditions of those religions kind of merge together a little bit because it's been centuries since. Now, due to Mormonism being generally well-suited for theocratic government style, and being situated in northern irrigation spots in the Rocky Mountains, so basically all their water is gotten through irrigation. The Mormon cities are much wealthier, cohesive, and more stable than their Catholic counterparts. They also have a ton of trade with Cascadia, which are the city-states that line the west coast. They do sometimes get taken over by herder dynasties or by a couple adventurous horse lords. The sheer cultural strength of their religion basically allows them to assimilate anyone who takes them over. So in the big picture, they never really get conquered. Just like their rivals to the south, the Mormons make use of slave soldiers and devote most of their societal energy to launching crusades against their religious enemies. Now, in modern times, Mormons have missions to foreign nations where young people will go for like 2 years to proselytize their religion to other people. In this world, you don't have that. Instead, you do it by serving the Crusader armies. This variation of Mormonism also has very strict societal laws around gender that are reminiscent of Islam.
Women.
As I've said before, most of the Muslim immigrants in America congregated within these city-states, since the nature of the society and the general climate around was a lot more compatible for the culture that they had come from. More so than the New Sinaites, at least, which was kind of their other option. You can also see a lot of Muslim influence in Mormon architecture and their heavy appreciation for shock troops. It's also a good thing to note that due to the mountainous and rocky surroundings of Utah, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, those areas, Mormon warriors specialize in climbing and traversal of difficult terrain. They're scouts and messengers who can cross any distance and any terrain without issue. Before I move on to the Catholics, both the Mormons and Catholics are very theocratic city-state structures that are reminiscent of Bronze Age societies. Because the river systems they're based around are so lacking, a lot of irrigation has to be done. The area around those river systems is not very inhabitable, so everyone has to stick very close to the river system. I mentioned this in my Bronze Age collapse video, but when you have a very strictly confined river system where only the land very close to the river is arable, it is very easy to control that society because anyone who's in power can immediately project it through navigable rivers. So the elite of these societies have no reason to offer any kind of like social contract or benefit to the lower classes, aside from the fact that they stop them from getting killed from neighboring civilizations and the fact that they are allowed to grow food. Those are the only benefits that the elite has to offer the lower class in order to maintain power. And in addition to that, both their religions are extremely prevalent within the society, so people use the divine as sort of a coping mechanism for the frankly terrible situations they live in. Now then, on to the Catholics.
The Holy Bible may preach peace, but when it is Christendom itself that is threatened, then it is every Christian's duty to defend all that is holy. His Holiness the Pope has called a crusade to reclaim the Holy Lands from the infidel, who would deny Christian pilgrims their right to visit the holy places. It is time for the armies of Christendom to put aside their differences and unite under one banner, the sign of the cross, and give back God's children what is rightfully theirs, or die trying.
What remains of Mex-America has collected into several small irrigation states, like the Mormons, along the Rio Grande River Basin, though there are a few on the southern bank of the Colorado River, and all of them are ruled over by a variation of the Catholic Church. They call themselves Catholic, but it's been 300 years since they've had any contact with the Pope in Rome, so if I had to bet, I would say that it probably doesn't look a lot like the Catholicism we know today. The Catholic city-states have integrated with Latin American and Native American cultures. This shows, especially in war, in that they have taken on the practice of gaining honor and prestige from seeing how long and how terribly you can torture your enemies, which was a real thing back in the day. And in their eyes, this helps them obtain favor from God so long as they're torturing an infidel. They also accept slavery as an institution and will buy slaves to fill out their ranks from both the Ninkarate and any of the seafaring civilizations we talked about last video. Now, because they're a lot farther from the Cascadians than the Mormons are, the area around the Catholics is extremely poor. So the only way for them to acquire wealth is for them to send out very risky caravans, either through the Mojave Desert to Cascadia or through Ninkarate territory to the south. Because the Rio Grande is such a shit river, water is what these people live and die by. So a lot of their wars against the Mormon League are to acquire better water sources, since the Colorado River, frankly, is... Even though the area around the river might not be very navigable, at least it's just a better place to be than the Rio Grande, just on sheer water flow. One advantage that the Catholics do have over their northern neighbors are interactions with the Great Plains tribes. Because the Mormons are cut off through by the Rocky Mountains and similarly difficult terrain, they don't really have a lot of interaction with anything east of them. However, the Catholics can very easily take a route through the Texas Plains to get to the Great Plains and speak with the horse lords. This has allowed the Catholics to put a lot of their military efforts into learning horse archery and using cavalry tactics, which don't work so well when they're trying to attack the Mormons, but if the Mormons ever venture into their territory, it is very easy for them to repel any attacks using cavalry tactics. Also, like the Mormons, the Catholics' culture and religion are so strong that if a herder dynasty were to ever take over a city-state, they would quickly be assimilated into the religion and culture of the city they've taken over.
Good evening, God Warriors. Just want to come on here and say, y'all know I've struggled to get my son, Braxley Dean, to come back into the Lord's fold. All he used to do was watch the demonic anime cartoons. But I'll tell y'all, he's been in his room for the past day, watching some program made in heaven. Thank you, Father Poochie.
So the Catholics also kind of just refuse to die.
What kind of place is this?
I fucking hate California. I hate it so much. And frankly, I think my hatred is justified considering the fact that most Californians seem to also hate California. So this is not my opinion, I'm just right. That said, I didn't have to reflect my hatred for California in this world building project, but I really, 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 really wanted to. So, next up is the Cascadian Alliance of Enlightened Autonomous Zones, often referred to just as Cascadia or Ecotopia or Pacifica, are a league of city-states along the west coast of the continent, and as a result of most of their population being of Yankee descent, the region takes after its ancestors culturally, with immense creativity, but also moral grandstanding, and also take after the tradition of extreme arrogance. If a Californian were to ever go east, they would act as though they are descending from heaven itself to bless the wretched peoples of this savage land with their presence. Trade, culture, creativity, and schooling make these cities the wealthiest in the world. However, unlike other nations, there is no history of pre-established religion in the area, so this causes them to have a very head-in-the-clouds utopian worldview as they smugly look down on the rest of the continent. So yes, very much like California today. Now, the Pacific states do have a religion, but it's this really weird wellness religion that combines traditions of Buddhism, Christianity, nature worship, and pseudo-religious philosophies, a lot of them centering around what they call the Avatar of the West, but who we know as Leviathan. Cascadia has a culture and an ethos that revolves around an aversion to judgment. So their court culture is very based on not trying to offend anyone rather than attempting to push forward a broader moral goodness. This makes a lot of their nobles extremely performative and status-seeking as a result. The Pacific states have a polis democracy style of government where each large city controls a certain amount of territory for farmland, where citizens vote on issues directly. Because the states make such absurd amounts of money from trade and culture, most people have become somewhat detached from reality and have this obsession with ideology as they are sort of in the midst of what they would call a philosophical enlightenment, but everyone else would call it an age of delusion and decadence. In spite of the egalitarian government and gross income of the cities, they have an immense population of serfs and poor who they don't consider as citizens, so are basically slaves. Slavery on the West Coast works a bit different from the East, because in the East, if you fight a battle and you lose and you're taken prisoner, you're turned into a slave and sold. In the West Coast, you cannot be turned into a slave for losing a fight or breaking a law. You get turned into a slave because of debt. So more often than not, it's more like indentured servitude than actual slavery, but it's still very, very bad. This ends up happening because in order to live under your own roof as a free person, you need an immense amount of money because new buildings are really hard to come across on the West Coast. So the price of real estate ends up going up more and more and more and more every year because there are more people who need housing, but there is not enough housing to give except slave stables. I'm being very subtle about this. Instead of expanding, city leaders tend to try and address this culturally with performative legislation and empty validation over their people's concerns. The only thing that has really changed from the ancestors of the Cascadians is that they have grown much more willing to use military force and violence against those outside of their circles. However, use of force within their borders is seen as evil, especially since they are completely isolated from any actual threats to their power. Best shot anyone has at actually taking them over would be the New Sinites. And frankly, the New Sinites don't care because they need people to trade with. See, I told you it'd be fast. This better be less than 40 minutes. And those were the last 5 factions in my Medieval America world building project. I've really enjoyed putting this together. I hope that you've enjoyed watching me rant about it and put in my, my personal opinions into this piece. But yeah, it's been a good time making these videos. I'm kind of blown away by especially how well the first video is doing. I put that thing up. First 2 days, I got like 20 views. Third day, it just spiked up to 250, which, okay, for a channel of my size, that's quite a bit. That's quite a lot. If you came here just for Medieval America, I hope that you'll stick around in the future because I have a lot more stuff coming. I have a lot more stuff planned. I want to kind of do videos in either this style or maybe a more theatrical style for some of my other projects, which I've already written. And depending on how the odds work out, because right now I'm trying to get published, but if that doesn't work out and I end up going through self-publishing, I do intend to upload some form of audiobook to this channel for free because honestly, I just need the exposure. But yeah, I have a bunch of stuff about history, about world building, about writing, travel, all that sort of stuff. I also want to make some stuff about martial arts and like Asian fantasy magic systems. That could be a cool video, but yeah, all those are in the works. I don't intend to slow down from here. I don't intend to speed up either because a lot of these videos are like 40 minutes. So if I upload 2 videos in a week, it's a treat, not a new schedule. Regardless, my name's been Alexander. I hope you enjoyed this clusterfuck. Yeah, we're at the end. We're done. All right. Bye.